Okay, Penn State football fans, blue-white breakdown time. I'm Bob Flounders, joined by one of the biggest Philadelphia 76ers fans I know, Johnny McGonigal. He has quickly turned the page on the Eagles season. Great game, entertaining game, but not a great game if you're an Eagles fan. Johnny, just at the top, before we get to Penn State, just wanted to say, hey, it was a hell of a game to watch, but I know that you're not really happy with the result.
Yeah. Bob, did you know that the Sixers are third in the East right now? Only a few games out of the Celtics. Joel Embiid playing at a high level. No, it's been a rough, it's been a rough couple days, like that Sunday. I'm not going to lie. I really thought with the A.J. Brown touchdown, that felt like, hey, like we're here to play kind of moment. And, still plenty of time left in that game. And look, you just can't make mistakes in the Super Bowl. You can't make mistakes against Patrick Mahomes. The holding thing aside, like I think that's a crappy way to end the game. But that aside, you can't have a crappy punt and let up a 65-yard return to give them a touchdown. You can't fumble and scoop and score. You can't give that up. So you can't have 0 sacks when you're the all-time sack team in the it's a tough one. It's a tough one. But hey, we try to turn the page. That's why I'm quite literally trying to turn the page here. And but plenty to talk about here with Penn State. We don't have to relitigate my sadness, Bob.
We don't. I just wanted to say it was a heck of a season for the Eagles.
Yeah.
And they're knocking on the door again. That's a good team. So
I'm interested to see. I am interested to see what happens with Miles Sanders now this offseason to tie it in with Penn State because he's out of contract now. They've got Kenny Gainwell on the rookie deal. He's going to be looking for a big contract. He deserves it after having a Pro Bowl season. To tie it in with Penn State, interested to see what comes of his situation this offseason and what kind of suitors he has for his services.
Yeah, I think that I would not surprise me if he's played his last game as an Eagle just because of the way that they draft, the way that their cap is, the fact they have an extra first-round pick. They have a lot of things they can do if they want. If they want to do that, and you mentioned Gainwell, their running game and that offensive line, they can make a lot of guys look good. But he didn't have – if that was his final game, that was not his best game as an Eagle. But we both know, and I think Penn State fans know how talented of a back he was. One more thing I just want to say about the Super Bowl, and I think you would agree. I just was really disappointed the playing surface. It's not an excuse because both teams had to play with that surface, but that's kind of a joke to have that kind of game and that kind of a field because it definitely was not. It did not enhance. It did not enhance the abilities of either team, and it's unfortunate. And I mentioned that because of the running game, and I just think that if you didn't have the right cleats on that day, maybe it wasn't going to be your day. But I was really surprised they did not get that field right, and hopefully that will never happen again. But Johnny, let's get to Penn State. It is Valentine's Day, Johnny. So we're halfway through February 14th. I'm not going to wish you a happy Valentine's Day, but we are roughly about a month away from the start of spring practice, I would say. So knowing that we've got a chance to talk to some young players last week, why don't we just look at, what's going to be new for Penn State once they start, spring drills, whether it's guys leaving or guys that are really talented, ready, poised to maybe make a big jump at either starting or playing a significant role. Why don't we go through a couple of positions on this episode, see how far we get. Let's start I think we should start at the position that we always kind of ballyhoo, and it's turned into, I think, a potential position of strength, the offensive line. What do we think is going to be new as spring practice inches closer? They obviously lost a really talented center in Juice Scruggs. But the good news is the way they've recruited and what they have coming back and what they've been able to – a player they've added in the transfer portal who is back. I think what's new is going to be very exciting for Penn State when it comes to the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. And, you look at those 2 losses. You mentioned Juice Scruggs, who has an NFL future ahead of him, and he's going to be at the Combine among 7 Penn Staters out in Indianapolis in a few weeks. So he has a chance to make himself some money out there on the field at Lucas Oil Stadium and in interviews. And he's a kid that you would expect to kill the interview process. And he's a really cerebral guy and really was the heartbeat of that Penn State offensive line last year, a unit that was a strength, was a positive, finally, under James Franklin in his tenure to have a group that was able to lead a solid rushing attack. And so, yeah, replacing him is going to be difficult. I think a sneaky loss is Bryce Effner in the way that he stepped up at right tackle for them last season, when Caden Wallace goes down. And but Caden, will be back. And you have Drew Shelton, who gained a lot of experience at left tackle while Olu Fashanu was out injured after that Ohio State game. And so in terms of newness, in terms of what to expect, like I'm expecting Hunter Nourzad to flip over from guard to center and man that spot, at least start there and see if it works out, because you've got depth and experience, really. Landon Tengwall and Sal Wormley at guard. And Nourzad has taken snaps at center before, both in game and in practice. And then at right tackle, we're expecting a battle here, a competition between Caden Wallace and Drew Shelton. And I'm interested to see how it pans out. And it is one of those that I think you have to keep an eye on really this spring. Battles are normally won, position battles are normally won in the fall. But this is a situation where Caden Wallace is, he's a veteran. He's been around for a long time. And if he gets the sense that Drew Shelton is taking this job, or if they're leaning Drew's way, the transfer portal opens up in May. And so I'm sure there's a bunch of these guys on the rosters who are older players who want to play. And if they're not getting the right vibes after spring camp, they could explore their options. So I'm really looking at right tackle as a position in question, not necessarily in like a bad way, but in a, hey, we got to figure out what Penn State has to figure out what they're going to do there.
Yeah. Great point on the transfer portal. I would say I absolutely agree 100%. But knowing James Franklin, knowing Phil Troutwine, I'm sure they're thinking along the lines that you are thinking about. Hey, look, we don't want anyone discouraged coming out of spring camp. So my thing would be, I would imagine they're going to do everything in their power to make it as 50-50 of a split at that right tackle position in spring. So there's really a big mystery going into August camp. I expect James to be asked that question. I expect James to say, you know what, we like both of them. We look at them as both starters. They're both going to play a lot of football. I think that's the way he has to do it, because you're right. If there's an injury or in a world where there's some separation, it makes sense, especially for the older player, to kind of look for his options in the fall, because Caden obviously wants to play. He can play. They do like Drew Shelton. So I'm sure James and Phil Troutwine will handle that, specifically that battle with kid gloves. I just think what's new to me, one of the things that's new to me, Johnny, is the left side of the offensive line. In a way, it's old, but it's also new, because neither starter at the start of 2022 was able to finish the year. Olu's back at left tackle. I mean, the expectations are through the roof for him, and deservedly so. But also Landon Tengwall, a guy that was a coveted recruit, was just starting to get things figured out with the position change at left guard. And he gets hurt during warmups before the Michigan game. And that had to have an effect. So assuming both those guys are 100% for spring, to me, that is new. I think Penn State should be excited about that, because I think that has a chance. The left side of the offensive line really has a chance to do something, I think, pretty special moving forward. I don't think either one of them is done developing. They're both still relatively young in terms of games played. So I wanted to throw one to you as far as kind of what is new. How about depth? Just depth on the interior of the offensive line. You mentioned Hunter Nourzad possibly being the center. They had Salim Wormley. Maybe you're hoping for a healthy Landon Tengwall. But with Nourzad moving over, I don't know how much Penn State's going to miss at the guard spots, because I think they're awfully excited about Vega Ione. I hope it's Vega Ione. I never know if the E is silent or not. Vega Ione. But I thought before he got hurt, I think Nick Dawkins, I thought in spring flashed a little bit. They have some players they really like. We haven't even really talked about the incoming recruits. They're going to need a little time. But I just think the depth they have, especially inside, I think that's new. And I'm really excited to see when Vega gets on the field, I'm just gonna. He's a guy that you want to watch, Johnny, when he's on the field. He's such a powerful player, and he put that kid on his back in the Minnesota game. I'm excited to see what can happen on the inside of the offensive line, even if it doesn't involve starters.
Yeah, you mentioned Vega, you mentioned Nick. I think JB Nelson's another one to consider. He got some run last season, and I thought he played well, given the spots that he came into. And so, yeah, you have Hunter Norzad moving over to center. That, by the way, that's not like James Franklin hasn't announced that or anything, but that's what logically makes sense. And we talked to Juice Scruggs, head of the Rose Bowl, about that possibility, and he was like, "Yeah, that makes sense, right?" So we're assuming that's what's going to end up happening here with the Penn State offensive line at center specifically. But yeah, to Hunter's left and right, I feel like there's enough depth there, and like you mentioned, the freshmen, the early enrollees, all three of them that are coming in: Alex Birchmeyer, Javen Williams, and Anthony Donka. You also have Chim Diona, who was more of a true tackle, I think. Coming in the summer, Birchmeyer, Williams, those guys will start off at tackle in spring ball and then see what happens from there. If they fit more, if their body types, if their skill set fits more on the interior, then those are just a couple more bodies that you have just in case. And two talented players at that too. I mean, Javen Williams, a 5-star offensive lineman, first 5-star offensive lineman of James Franklin's tenure, and Birchmeyer was one of the best, if not the best player coming out of Virginia. So you like what you have from a front end, first team, talent wise. I think you really like what you have there, going from Fashanu on the left side all the way over to whether it's Wallace or Shelton on the right, and then the depth I think they're in a really good spot. I think they can withstand an injury if they get it. But obviously you'd like guys like Landon Tengwall to be healthy throughout the entire year and Olu Fashion to be healthy throughout the entire year. And that starts with spring camp. Keep them healthy. Yeah. Keep those guys in bubble wrap and make sure there's no freak injuries in March and April.
Yeah. All right. We're talking about what could potentially be new for Penn State heading into spring, but throughout the off season here on the Blue White Breakdown. Johnny McGonigal and Bob Flounders. Johnny, if we wanted to, we could probably spend about 4 hours talking about the wide receiver room. So let's table that to when we have a little bit more time, because between the position, the change at the coaching spot, the transfer portal, the young guys, Keandre Lambert-Smith, to me, that's almost like a whole Blue-White Breakdown episode. Another position, though, that interests me is the safety room. What's new at safety for a number of reasons. I don't think you would get much disagreement from the fan base if you said James Franklin's in his 10th year and he never had a safety quite like Jair Brown during his tenure. He had some good players for sure at safety, guys that played in the NFL. But when you want to talk about a guy like an all-around safety, I don't think it's even that close. I think Jair Brown has absolutely been the best all-around safety that James Franklin has had. They're replacing him. Hopefully he gets his name called early in the NFL draft. I don't see why he wouldn't. But when you look at the makeup of that safety room and what they have back, they're definitely gonna miss Jair Brown. But it's not like the cupboard. There are some talented players ready, I think, for bigger roles. We saw it when James committed to playing, Zakee Wheatley and Jalen Reed in 2022 early, but they also have some players behind them that they like, and they continue to recruit really talented safety prospects. Not all of them are on campus now, but boy, Johnny, to me, that's a fascinating position. We won't see all of them in spring, but when you want to talk about competition, I think Keaton Ellis, the veteran, is obviously going to be a starter, but Manny Diaz and Anthony Poindexter could go a lot of different ways at the other safety spot. And when they go to extra DB packages, I'm sure they're going to be comfortable playing at least 3 safeties on the field at once, if not more, because that's how good this group is.
Absolutely. Yeah. You mentioned Jair Brown at the top, and it can't be overstated just the importance that he had on not only that safety room, but that defense as a whole and that team. Yeah. Heartbeat of the defense. And not just from an emotional standpoint, from a production standpoint as well. It helps when you have a leader that is, that has the respect of the room, that is also backing it up with what he's doing on the field. I mean, he was making plays, just drive in, drive out for this defense. A defense that prides itself on being aggressive and being disruptive. And I really think Jair set that tone along with Joey Porter Jr. and Kalen King in the secondary. So replacing that, it's going to be difficult. But having Keaton Ellis back, a veteran player who started a bunch for this team, I think really helps. But then you look at Jalen Reed and Zaki Wheatley, and if you actually look at the defensive snap breakdown from 2022, Jalen Reed actually played more snaps defensively than Keaton Ellis did. Right. Jalen Reed 430, Ellis 391, and Zaki Wheatley 372. So there's a lot of experience there, a lot of reps, a lot of production from all three of those. And so, if you're Anthony Poindexter, the safeties coach, you're feeling really good with what you have with your top three guys. And then even beyond them, KJ Winston is one that I think can really step up this season. I know you have a story coming out on Mekhi Flowers from Harrisburg. He's making progress after his freshman season. You mentioned the incoming guys, Dakari Nelson and King Mack. Yeah. Again, King Mack, one of the best names, probably the best name on the roster. And I think both of those guys, though, they have the pedigree that you want. Both four-star guys, both from the South, and were heavily recruited by the SEC, decided to come up to Penn State. And so, Elliott Washington is another one to keep an eye on. I know that he's listed as a DB on Penn State's roster. And in his Twitter bio, he says he's a corner. So it'll be interesting to see where he begins his Penn State career, whether that's at safety or corner. I think they like having the flexibility there. But I don't think you necessarily need him to play safety because you're so confident in the depth that you have, that's a luxury when you lose a guy like Jair Brown. It can't be overstated that when you lose a guy like that and have the pieces that they have in place, it's a pretty good spot. It's a pretty good spot for Anthony Poindexter.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about Penn State in the safety position and where they're at right now, I think we also have to credit James and his assistants' recruiting efforts, and also Anthony Poindexter, the position coach, because not too long ago, Johnny, safety was an issue for Penn State in terms of depth. They were having to move players to play safety, whether it was Nick Scott, whether it was Troy Apke. They had some classes where they brought safeties in. One of the guys you covered at Pitt was a safety guy was originally a Penn State safety guy. He eventually got on the field at Pitt and had a really nice career, but they were having trouble, I think, getting safeties up to speed, recruiting them and getting them up to speed at Penn State. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think they've gotten better at it. I think they developed better. I think they're getting better prospects. Johnny Patrician, that's the name. Sorry, I didn't want to short Johnny Patrician because I really respect the fact that he was able to really become a really good college player at Pitt, because it didn't look good for him. I think he had a lot of injuries at Penn State. But a note on Mekhi Flowers, last year he just wasn't big enough. He was a pretty highly touted kid out of CD East, but he said he walked on when he got to Penn State as a 4-star, he was 179 pounds, and that just is not going to cut it, I think, at major college football. He said he's close to, he's up to the 190s. He's bigger. I think he's going to be able to compete for playing time, whether it's on special teams or, as a backup safety, and maybe have a much larger role. He's definitely an athlete, and I'm anxious to see him. But I wanted to circle back just to Zaki Wheatley, because, Johnny, he just seems to me that every once in a while you find those guys that they always have a knack for getting either their hands on the ball or forcing a turnover, or if it's a big play, he's in the middle of it in a good way. And that's really, he hasn't played long at Penn State, but this guy, he is around the ball, and, whether it's forcing fumbles, whether it's interceptions, he had a big hit on that quarterback in the Rose Bowl, and he had to leave the game shortly after with a knee injury. I'm not saying he caused it, but Wheatley is a guy that finds the football, and I think that eventually he is going to force his way onto the field, and that's going to be a really good thing for Penn State. If you're looking for a guy that's going to be maybe Penn State's next really great ball hawk after Jair Brown, my money would probably be on Wheatley. But all those guys, they have so many options. I just think that the safety position has come a long way at Penn State in a short time.
Yeah, I mean, Zaki Wheatley was the takeaway king coming out of training camp ahead of the 2022 season. And yeah, James had a quote back then. It was in August saying that, hey, some guys just have a nose for the ball. They just have the ball just finds them. And it was such an easy quote to go back and use whenever we were writing about Zaki throughout the 2022 season because it was kind of just like a prediction coming true here where this isn't just a fluke. It's not just a fluke that he was around the ball during training camp because you look at the production that he had, like you mentioned, 2 picks, a forced fumble, pass breakup, and 27 total tackles. He was around the ball. Even when he wasn't logging something in the stat sheet, it felt like he was affecting the play. And that's what you want to see. That's what you want to see. I mentioned how Manny Diaz wants to play this defensive mentality, that aggression, that the disruption, and to be able to develop safeties, like I said, when you have a Jair Brown already and playing so many snaps and playing such a role, but to be able to develop a Zaki Wheatley, to develop a Jalen Reed, and Winston, one of 4 true freshmen on the defensive side of the ball to have over 100 snaps in 2022. That's big. That's big for your development. And as a safety room, as a defense, as a team. And so I really like what Zaki has coming into this spring camp. I think it could be a big opportunity for him. We don't know Jalen Reed's status. We know that his arm was in a sling. We saw after the Rose Bowl, and he had surgery in the weeks following that. So not sure what his availability will be for spring camp once that starts. We'll have to ask James Franklin next time we see him, Bob. But Zaki Wheatley, this could be a big spring for him.
Yeah. Let's do one more real quick. I still think this is an interesting position just because of what they're replacing and what's coming back and what potentially is coming down the road because of the way they've recruited the position. But Johnny, let's talk about the tight end room. Brenton Strange had his best year by far in 2022. He is going to hear his name called in the NFL draft. I don't know if it'll be on the second day. It might be, or if it isn't on the second day, it's probably going to be early on day 3. I would say Penn State's most complete tight end when you talk about blocking, catching, all that stuff. A team leader, really impressed by him. He was a kid that did not weigh much when he got to Penn State, and when he left, he was close to 250. They're gonna miss him, but when you have what they have coming back, in Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren, plus the way they've recruited that position the last couple of classes, it's exciting to think about the potential of the tight end room and how they can use them as chess pieces in the offense with 2 and 3 tight end sets, the T formation, all of that good stuff with those running backs. As excited I am about to watch Theo Johnson's final, this should be his final year at Penn State. I think he was probably pretty, curious about maybe leaving for the NFL. You had written that, and I think that, he didn't really say anything, but he certainly athletically matches up with a lot of the tight ends that are eligible for the draft. But I also was excited to see Tyler Warren come on the final 5 or 6 games in 2022. The former quarterback in high school, he looks really comfortable at tight end now, and I just think that's a great 1-2 punch. And I'm sure there's going to be a couple. It could be Khalil Dinkins, it could be somebody else, but they want to play 3 tight ends, and I want to see which third tight end emerges.
I'm thinking it might be Jerry Cross, who is, he was out injured last season, but James Franklin, throughout the year on multiple occasions, unprompted would just bring up Jerry Cross as a guy who, is one to keep an eye on. And that was the case throughout the, talking to offensive players throughout the Rose Bowl. He was a name that popped up. And so keep an eye on him. But yeah, I just don't think you can overlook the potential that Theo Johnson has he obviously was a big play magnet, last season, and he was able to push the ball down the field and break loose for this offense that really struggled at times to push the ball downfield. But I think he has more to give. He even knows that after the Rose Bowl, was able to talk to him for a bit outside Penn State's locker room. And he said he was leaning towards coming back because he felt like he had room to become a more complete tight end. And, he said he's not satisfied with his play. And I think he has more to give and more to grow. And, but man, is he athletic, to have that kind of speed and to be that big body, to have 6'6", a 6'6" frame going over the middle and testing safeties and corners in the slot. that's so difficult to deal with. And when you have that speed, it's hard for a linebacker to keep up. So if Mike Yurcich is able to use him the way I'm sure Theo Johnson wants to be used in this offense, then you're looking at a real, like you said, a real chess piece, but someone that it could be a trump card, for this offense going into the 2023 season. And what better, to have for a true freshman, not a true freshman anymore, but a first-year starting quarterback is a dominant, dependable tight end. And so I think Theo Johnson is in for a really big year.
Yeah, I think athletically, I mean, he is absolutely in the same class as Gesicki and Pat Freiermuth. And I just remember talking to him for a magazine story before the 2022 season. And I had heard the time, and I was like, I'm going to ask the other tight ends. And they all verified it to the 100th of a second. 4.51 he ran at 260 pounds. And he was pretty confident that number was going to go lower when he runs it again. But I mean, that is the highest. I mean, that's the best time. I think that he broke Gesicki's 40 time. And I know there's a lot more to football, right, than a fast 40 time. But I thought in the second half of the year, he was playing to that on the field. It's one thing to look the part, in the uniform. But as the year went on, he was having a greater impact on the game, and not just as a receiver, as a blocker. I think he has come a long way, and so has Tyler. They both have come a long way as blockers. I think you have to give Ty Howe some credit for that too. I think they also took their lead from Brenton Strange, and he's going to be missed. But it should be if you're a new quarterback at Penn State with the toolkit that Drew Aller has, it could probably be a little bit nerve-wracking. But when you look at who you could hand the ball to and who you could throw the ball to, and their size dimensions, and you look at that offensive line, it could be pretty good to be Drew this fall if he claims the job, which we expect him to. They're gonna miss some players, but boy, the way that James Franklin's recruited and the tight end position, I think is a clear example of that. Boy, they have really done a great job, and it's gonna be exciting to watch the tight ends. It's gonna be exciting to watch the offensive line, and it's gonna be really exciting to watch these safeties. I mean, they're replacing some really good players, but they're now to the point where they are reloading on a consistent basis. There's not a lot of a good program. They lose some good players, but they got guys ready to step in. I feel like that's where Penn State is. I know you're excited too, Johnny.
Yeah, one more note on Theo Johnson too. Over the last 7 games of Penn State season, he had one 25-yard catch in 6 of Penn State's final 7 games of the year.
Yeah.
Now it was a little sporadic because sometimes he'd have 2 catches in a game and one of them. But again, to have that kind of playmaking ability, and if you're able to get that to be more consistent, and shoot, if you can have 2 of those a game, or 3 of those catches every couple games, you're looking at a real piece that you can build around in an offense. And when you start working a play action game with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen of that offensive line, and it can get really tough as a defense to be able to defend that. And so, Theo Johnson is one to watch. And like you mentioned, Tyler Warren, I think was dependable when needed. We'll see who emerges among that third tight end group, whether it's Jerry Cross, Dinkins, maybe even Joey Schlafer from Exeter, who's coming in, came in as an early enrollee. So, we'll see. But I think Theo is definitely one to watch this spring ball. And like you mentioned, the safeties and the offensive line as well. And we'll talk about more positions too as the podcast roll on in the coming weeks.
All right, Johnny, that's going to be a wrap for this Blue White Breakdown. Also, kudos to you for moving on. I like the fact you're wearing a Sixers hat. I think that's a really good sign for your emotional well-being. I'm happy to see it. But you're right. I wanted to talk about the wideouts, but to me, that's almost like you have to write a book about this position. I don't know that there's a more interesting position than wide receivers, and maybe we'll get to that either next week or the following week. But spring practice is about a month out, Johnny. Before you know it, it's going to be 60. I don't know if you see where I'm going with this. It's going to be warmer out, and the next thing you know, it's going to be Philly season. They're almost already ready for spring training. You won't even remember the Super Bowl in a couple of months.
Pitchers and catchers report soon, Bob. So that's what we're hanging on to.